journalists. CC my ass is something that you probably all have thought, if not have done. The way that we suffer from endless copy chains is pretty brutal. Who had an email in their inbox this week that had more than 4 people CC'd? Okay, that's about half of the audience. Who had somebody who had more than 10 people CC'd? Is there anybody? Yes. Oh, I feel you. Okay, there's still like about 10 people. Wow. So what we're trying to do in this panel, and I urge you to please, the ladies, would you mind? Thank you. Our entire conference started because of email. A couple of years back, I was a journalist here in New York City. A friend of mine came to me and said, I have an opportunity for you. As a German, I didn't even know what that meant. I have an opportunity for you. What is that? But I said yes. The opportunity was to host a conference. And this conference was called Inbox Awesome. Inbox Awesome because it was about how do we email better? How do we work better together? How do we collaborate? What are the tools, the strategies out there? And I took over that job and I realized that it was journalism at its core. Interesting people together, telling great stories, having meaningful discussions, and sharing information back and forth. The big difference for me as a journalist in writing or being on television is that I don't get to broadcast, I get to have a conversation with you, and that is why I enjoy doing conferences so much. And Inbox Awesome grew and grew, and then we said, actually what we're doing here is something a lot bigger. It's actually the future of work. And that's how this double concept that you're experiencing today came together. Because Work Awesome is now also an event. It is happening in Berlin and in New York, and it makes me work a lot better, and I hope at the end of the day it will make you work better too. The email world to me, since I got involved in it a couple of years back, has been absolutely fascinating. It's the oldest technology that's out there when it comes to like digital communication. It's super patchy, so nobody in email knows everything. Like everybody's like working on like a little piece of it. And the Inbox Awesome conference had this kind of like mission: find the CEO of email, find the person that knows all about it. We never found him or her, never. Because the industry is so vast and it's moving constantly, and it creates such a strong industry that new branches of this tree are growing all the time. What I found super interesting this year, preparing for this stage, was there's a new thing coming to email and coming to a lot of the tools that we use. It is collaboration. And today, there will be 4 different perspectives on these topics that I'm super excited about, because they really came from all over the United States, from Canada. They came here to share that with you. And I would like to introduce him just by asking you all for on stage Nikita Miller from Dropbox, Nikita Miller from Trello at Atlassian, Faryl from Dropbox, Philippe Lehoux from Missive, and Maz Paul from Mailjet. Welcome. Nikita, I think I have to start with you. 2 years ago, we had the co-creator of Trello at our conference. And he showed us his Trello board. Who's using Trello? All right, about 50%. It was a mess. It was huge, like full of Trellos and sub-Trellos and sub-Trellos. And then a year later, you got acquired by Atlassian, so you moved into an entirely new communication environment. You became part of a much larger organism as Trello. How is your Trello board today? And what are the biggest struggles that you had with your own communication at work since you moved with this nice little thing called Trello into the big Atlassian?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. So, a few things. So, in terms of Trello and how we operate, in a lot of ways, it actually hasn't changed too much. So as of right now, we operate as part of Atlassian, but in terms of our product principles, how we develop Trello, the product, how we design it, that's pretty much stayed the same, and so we operate sort of separately. One of the big things that's changed is that now that we're part of a 2,500 person company, we now are using Trello all day, every day, but we're also using other collaboration tools that our Atlassian teammates have created. So one of the biggest ones is Confluence. In terms of the trends that are happening not only in our own team, but across productivity and collaboration spaces, what's happened? So now we're even larger and more distributed. We have a lot more remote team members. Like other companies, we've also come to realize that a lot of our best work in terms of solving complex problems comes from interdisciplinary teams working together. And so we need to find really good ways of making everything we do in terms of collaboration faster, easier. We need better ways of working asynchronously and synchronously. And we also need to find ways to make sure that as we do that, it's also fun and delightful. So Trello was created with all those things in mind. And some of our Atlassian products similarly so Confluence as well. So right now we use Trello in terms of getting a high-level perspective on what's happening within a team, across teams, in some cases across the organization. We use Confluence, that's now a huge part of our collaborative framework, and we use Confluence as our living document, basically. So when teams are collaborating and need to understand what's happening in a project or kicking off projects, we use that as our document framework. That's where we add, that's where we communicate, that's where we make decisions, and then once we go into a project, we kind of move those things into Trello. In terms of how they work together, one of the things we've made a huge effort to do is our integrations are just a lot deeper. So when you're in a Confluence document, for instance, you can see Trello cards or lists that are relevant to a project. When you're in Trello, you can do the same. You can see related information or materials from Confluence as well. I think one of the biggest things that we've had to focus on is while both of our teams always worked on building tools to help people collaborate, we're also focusing a lot more on frameworks to kind of supplement these tools, which I think is a lot of what many teams are trying to figure out right now as well.
What do you use email for at all?
A lot of our email use is external. Internally, within our teams, we don't use email very much at all. A lot of so external communication. So if we're doing research, for instance, sometimes that might start with an email, and then once we connect with someone, then it moves into Confluence or Trello, that interaction. So internally, not so much.
Faryl, you have created something that also tries to kind of like make people collaborate in a very, very different way, which is called Dropbox Paper. Has anybody who has used Dropbox Paper in this room? It's fairly new, so we have about 4 or 5 people who already know about it. Can you maybe explain what in the world made Dropbox create like an entirely new platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would also phrase another question. How many people here have used or know about Dropbox? So I think that's a good way to start us off
100%.
to say our customers, obviously, and a lot of people out there even who don't use Dropbox know about it, and they think about it for file sync and share. So you're going to store your files, you're going to set them, maybe you occasionally have to send them, otherwise you forget about it. Whereas what we heard from tons of our customers were they didn't just want to store their files, they actually wanted to actively use their content. Maybe they used some different files and illustrations for a brand campaign last year, and now they want to do a new brand campaign. And so they want to bring those files back up, they want to talk about them, they want to work on a project, and they want to release a new campaign. And so from that evolved Dropbox Paper, which is a collaborative workspace that we built for teams. So you can come together and you can put all your content in one place, and then you can comment on it. You can create to-do lists. You can really work on projects in Dropbox Paper. So at first glance, you'd open up a paper doc and it looks like a typical text editor that you're probably used to. Many people can remotely collaborate. You can be typing at the top of a doc, at the bottom. You can comment and suggest things. So that's kind of the typical aspect, but we've layered on additional functionality that we heard is very valuable from our customers. So one aspect of that is how we handle multimedia content. So no longer are people just using text and a couple images. So with Dropbox Paper, you can add a YouTube link in, and the video plays right in your doc. Or you can add a Pinterest board, and that previews. So instead of having to switch between tools, Paper really handles all this rich content very well. So that's one of the aspects we've layered on top. The second is project management. So people didn't want to be switching from their project management tool back to their content. And so in Paper, you can create to-do lists. You can assign tasks to colleagues, and they'll get reminders. We just launched a new feature that we're really excited about called Timelines, which helps with project management. And so as you can see, it's bringing the content and then the communication around that content together in one space. And one example of a customer that really inspires me is SNL. They use Paper to put together their shows. So if you can imagine, they're having multiple meetings. They're having costume designers. They're having the actors and actresses. They're having the producers. And they're constantly iterating on their show up until the moment that they actually perform. And so they use Paper, and you think about the team, there's tons of remote people, there's people there, there's all this type of content, and they're moving quickly, and they need to keep track of things in one place, and they choose to do it in Paper.
Let's move outside for the United States for a moment. I'm so fascinated by your story, Philippe. For the last 4 years, I believe,
Yep.
you're in your small team of
Three.
Three?
Well, yeah.
bunkered down in Quebec, creating an entirely new platform and a thing that basically, as you explained it, combines email with Slack and Google Docs.
Yeah.
Why in the world?
What we experienced when we built a previous startup is that we live in many silos.
Excuse me, your previous startup was Conference Badge.
Yeah, it's like a
.com,
Vista
so
print for print badge.
you make these.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Sorry.
And so that business grew quite fast, and by managing that business, we were using many products, but still as a small team. And what ends up is that you have many silos where you have both your task, and then you chat in Slack, and then if you have an important conversation with an outside partner, you do it by email. You're alone in your email client, you want to share this with some of your teammates. So you end up either copying, pasting this in Slack, or creating a Google Docs to actually create the draft. So our ideas was what if we could make a multiplayer email client, where your teams is in? And one thing we believe is that email is not going away, mainly for external conversation, like you just said. For internal conversation, there are better tools, right? But that's still in sync with our vision, because in Missive, you don't email each other. You don't have to CC each other. If you have an email you want to share with part of your team, you just mention them in the thread, and it starts a chat conversation in between those emails. So it's quite fascinating that if you look back and you search this for a customer email address in 6 months, you not only find the emails, but you also find the related conversation you had about that customer. So that's really powerful. But the challenge is that we do not want to create one more silos. It's not a help desk. It's not a tool to manage just your shared inbox. It's a tool where we want you to manage all your emails, personal business, and shared. So that way, it's one less silos. You do not have one app. You replace your email client. You do not lose anything, because it's nice, it's fast, it's powerful. You can snooze. You have all those new features that have made emails more productive still in, but then you gain your team in. So that's our vision. It took 4 years to get to that point. Last year was quite good. We've been featured on the App Store 2 times.
I think we can, this is Missive, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was just a quick snapshot of my view, and I took this one because you can see there's no emails, right? It's a conversation in a label called in progress, and it's a conversation about our Asana integration we're working on. And you can see there's like you would find in Slack, right, integration, content from the Canny platform, which is kind of feedback platform. So any people suggesting or commenting on the Asana integration, content will push in that thread, where we will discuss how we built it. Mm-hmm. But also you can see there's tasks to other conversation. Those are emails of people who asked for this. So in a year, well, not in a year, in a few weeks, hopefully, when we release that, I'm going to go through all those tasks, go in the right conversation, and email those people back directly at the right email, personal emails. And people are fascinated by that, because obviously we're just 3, so sometimes people ask for features 3 years ago, And it's like we're just doing them now, but I'm following up, even if they're no customer anymore, and they're like, oh my God, that email is from 2015. How can you manage that? I was like, well, I had a task in my email client. You should use Missive again. And so that's the big vision. So it's not just for support, right? That's the challenge we're facing. People are like, oh, I'm going to use it for support. Well, it's way more, but that's hard to articulate. So.
I've been following your journey for a while, and this year something else happened, or actually last year. Miles, you and I connected, and I found out there's this company out of Paris called Mailjet. They're not only coming to the US, they're also doing something nobody has ever done, which is building also an entirely new platform on top of their existing framework, just to follow the same mission, make people happier at work and enable collaboration. But I didn't want to answer the question for you. Why in the world would like a super well-run company decide to do this and dive into this adventure of building something that you have to educate people on and nobody's used to?
I love that you called us a super well-run company. That's because, as everybody knows,
well-known.
Well-known, thank you. Okay. Yeah. So Mailjet, for those who don't know, we are an email service provider. So we help you. We have a platform that helps you build your emails, your bulk emails, your transactional triggered emails, as well as send them through the platform. And kind of picking up on everything that's being talked about, I think you mentioned at the start, Felix, that email is one of the oldest technologies, obviously, especially when it comes to digital communications. And I think because of that, the innovation is pretty stagnant at this point. I think where we innovate is kind of around the edges. But what we wanted to do is actually take a look at like how people are working, how people are actually working on projects, on marketing projects. They do that in Dropbox paper. They do that in Trello. And when it comes to actually building newsletters, building the emails that you receive from all the stores that you get for Black Friday and so forth, that's often kind of done in a very antiquated way where you have one individual working hard on an email for a while. They then forward it on to their boss and they get feedback maybe in person, or they have to send an email backwards. And it was just not in line with actually how people are working today in the workplace. So our mission was like, how do we catch up email to the rest of the world? How are people working in Trello, in Dropbox, in Google Docs? Can we embed that within email? So what we've done is really made that a place where you can go and, I guess we have a bit of a GIF here. Editing in real time, you get your whole team involved there, commenting, all the classic features you can expect from what we've been talking about today. But I think really what's most important, I was actually talking, it might have been Faryl before this, just about the amount of mistakes that happen in email. There is now, I guess, an undo button on Gmail, but there really isn't an undo button in email the same way you can delete a Facebook post or LinkedIn. So there's so many mistakes that are happening. So we kind of recognize that as well, and make embedding within the team a recognition of like different roles. So if you're a designer, you probably shouldn't be writing the copy. And if you're writing the copy, don't change the logo, don't change the branding, the colors. I am a copywriter more than a designer, and I've been yelled at by my design team many, many times. So what we've done is really make those permissions around who can send the email, who can change different pieces of content within it, really to kind of catch email up to the rest of the world and the rest of the way people are working. And I think, as we've launched this and rolled it out with different companies, it's definitely starting to see it integrates well with everything else.
I have a question here from Jessica that I think is relevant for all of you. What advice would you give to a more traditional, high-touch and email-reliant culture that is unwilling to invest in new internal tech? I think you all have customers and users that deal with that. What advice would you have?
Personally, I have a lot of calls with potential customer, and usually they're going to say, when I say, you have a thread, and now if you're email-based, even for internal conversation, you're CC or BCCing, and you're always just a reply all the way of creating a mess, because you're going to reply both to, the internal people, but also leak the information, let's say, to the customer. So, creating a safe space around internal conversation is really powerful, and it can save you, I guess, money if you don't do those mistakes. So creating a safe space for internal conversation, I think, has a lot of advantage.
Related to that, the product manager in me is asking, like, what are you specifically solving for? when you try and introduce this to the company. So in email, is it the speed with which decisions are made? Is it the space to actually, do collaboration, because an email seems confining in terms of, what's the actual outcome? Is it the fact that, it's not a great space at present for like synchronous or asynchronous communication? So be very specific about what you're solving for, and I think that makes a difference. So, if it's some version of someone presents something on an email, but it's something that you're going to need to collaborate with in like some more free-form setting, then call that out up front and then find a tool or some tool that has a suite, that enables that. So I think that's my initial thought, which is, yes, I think there's a lot of conversation around all the things that may be wrong with email, but it could also be that you're attempting to use email for a situation that's not intended for, or you're looking for a different kind of tool to solve that problem.
And I think for us at Dropbox, we've been seeing this for a while now, where it used to be that you had your tools that you used in your personal life, and they were very different than the tools you used at work. And when you went to work, you met with the IT department, and they gave you your equipment, and you said, this is my work life, and this is my personal life. But that's just not the reality anymore. Like, some of us have two phones, but a lot of us have our work email and our personal email on our phone. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people find tools that they like using in their personal life, and then they actually bring them to work. And whether they're approved by the IT department or not, people are going to find ways to use them. So often we'll meet with IT departments and we'll be able to say, many of your employees are already using tools such as Dropbox in their personal life and probably in their work life. And so the best way is to actually and make sure that you sign up for plans such as Dropbox Business, let's say, that allows you to have admin and security controls. So for example, if an employee leaves and you've signed up with the more, the business SKUs, you'll be able to wipe that employee's information when they leave. Whereas if people are kind of just going rogue with the tools they like, you won't have that type of security control. So we often encourage IT departments to really be realistic about what their employees are using, regardless of whether it's approved or not, and then bring those tools. And plus, then employees already know the tools, and they already like working in the tools. So there's less of a ramp-up period, which saves time. And also, people are just happier using tools that they already know and love.
Yeah. My sinister life hack that I'm currently applying right now is when I want to convince my team or my boss to look at different tools, is make my problem their problem. So when I'm dealing with a problem at work in terms of whether I guess in the email context where I'm constantly sending emails with mistakes in it because an intern's involved and we need to deal with that problem, make sure that the actual person that's responsible for it sees that problem, they feel that problem, and that in a way that you can start to justify the cost or whatever you need to do when you're talking to the IT team. I think too many times we try to communicate a problem, but actually making the decision maker or the larger team actually feel that problem will go a long way at actually helping implement these solutions.
There's a question by Chad that also is something that we discussed before this panel. I mean, you're all building these new platforms, right? Isn't this kind of like crazy? Isn't it just better to stay within like the one G Suite kind of thing forever because they're constantly going to iterate it? The question here is a little more different. It says, what is the advantage of keeping all communications in one suite versus using a combo of best tools? But my question would go even further and say, aren't we like entering an era of tool chaos?
Yeah.
Because everybody is able to build now and is building faster than ever, better than ever?
I think that's, I would say that's one prediction I have for the space is the risk of collaboration fatigue. Is that, in businesses, every few years, there's new products that are implemented that improve the workflow, but add some friction, right? Because every single employee needs to know how to use those products, and we're no better at Missive. I mean, if you want to use the product, you need to train yourself. But then if you start to using many different products that technically does around the same thing, right? Managing tasks, command thing. So there start to be friction and competition between products that are used inside the same company. So I think in that space, that's a risk. Like employees say, I know more. I don't care about this new product, right? I just want to keep the way I'm doing. And when I talk to customer, that's one of the frictions, like onboarding everyone. If some people say no, well, the product won't be embraced. So it's one risk.
I think we're seeing a lot of tool proliferation, and that's something we hear from customers all the time is, I'm losing so much headspace switching between tools that I actually can't do work. And one of the stats we like to talk a lot about at Dropbox is a McKinsey study that said 60% of an employee's time is spent on work around work, which involves like finding content, resending content that you already sent but someone can't find anymore. And so we think a lot about how do we prevent that work around work. And part of it is not just building brand new tools, but building tools that help your existing tools work together. So we don't say, we imagine that you're going to use Dropbox Paper and you'll never use anything again. We say, tons of teams and companies and people are going to use tons of tools, and how can we help you work together and really partner with other companies, whether they're seen as competitors or not. And so also, many people are already storing their content in Dropbox, and so it was natural, instead of having to move their content to another tool, they can now integrate it with Paper. But some examples, for example, we integrate with Slack. So if you have a Paper doc, you can easily share it in a Slack channel by using certain slash commands. We integrate with Google Spreadsheets is another example, or Excel spreadsheets. So we know there's going to be different people on a team that are going to use specialized tools, and we're not telling them not to use those tools. Like designers are going to go into Sketch. Finance team is going to go into Excel. But then at some point there's going to be a project plan where you need to bring it all together. Like the finance team needs to share a version of their budget. They don't need to show every pivot table, but they need to kind of show the bottom line. And so they can paste a link to a spreadsheet, and that previews in Paper. And the same with the designer. You don't need to know like every iteration of a design, but like what's the final magazine cover going to look like? Paste a link, and then everyone on the team can see it. So that's how we really think about it.
I think at Trello you kind of like experienced a little bit of collaboration fatigue even, right? Because the people using Slack had to go to Stride by Atlassian, and then it was super tricky, of course, because using a different platform. And how did that all play out in the end?
I'm going to maybe answer that question, but I had another thought that I wanted to share. So the way that we think about team and team collaboration at Trello and at Atlassian more broadly, I think is a little bit different. So we have very similar things to what we've just described in terms of tools, but we're trying to think about how to empower teams to work their best in the context of what are the tools that you're using, but also what are the frameworks that you're using as a team. So there's no shortage of tools that you can use, Trello, Confluence, Jira, et cetera, to kind of integrate projects or work cross-functionally, and we have a lot of things there. But we're also trying to figure out, in a world where there's, collaboration fatigue, how do we empower teams to work strategically using tools, but also using frameworks that we know work. So layered on top of our tools, we also have this idea of team playbooks. And so we've made this huge effort to kind of publish playbooks that help you figure out when your triad isn't working optimally. It could be about the tool, but it could also be about the dynamics between individual team members. So some version of how do we use these tools to help individuals, human beings, reconnect in the context of what it is to work as human beings working on a project, not just as different portions as different inputs in a tool. So I think that's something that's helping us think about it a little differently. To your question around what we're using in terms of switching between, yes, we switched from Slack to Stride. A couple of months ago, we announced that we're no longer going to be using Stride, which was our awesome internal messaging tool. We entered a space Slack was the winner in that space, and so we made a business call on what we're going to do there. Now we're partnering with Slack. We're deeply integrated with that product, and so we're kind of moving on in that sense. In terms of what that meant for the team, it really just was about kind of recalibrating our standards in terms of how we work together. So similarly to what we were saying before, we have all of these great tools for collaboration and project management and messaging, but we also, most importantly, had to step back and say, what are our standards for how we're going to communicate as a team, as a product group, and ultimately as a company? And a lot of that had to do with just a lot of face-to-face agreement on the tools we're going to use and how we're going to use them. And without having that standard up front, I think it'll be difficult, even if we have one tool to rule them all, without having those standards of how we work together, I don't know if it's actually going to make a difference.
to give it a future outlook and to try to make a bold statement, in the end, I would ask you all four to give us a very bold vision. How is what we saw there, let's just say 5 years, because it's so fast. How's this going to look like? Like, how are we going to collaborate? What is your dream tool that you can dream up that's going to be on our screens, shining at us in 5 years from now?
Me again.
I'm sorry. You're just so close.
I think it's some version of what Faryl started talking about. I think there are two things that are really that I'm thinking about right now. One is this idea that as individuals, we're fairly nuanced, right? And so this idea that we have a work persona and a personal life persona. I'm now recently a mom and a mom persona, and somehow all these things are disconnected is just not realistic. And so in so much as we can create tools that help us be like a unified version of ourselves, I think that makes that, I see that happening where, I'm Nikita Miller in one account, and that one account potentially is like one identity that I can then figure out what I'm doing without having to feel like I'm parsing different elements of who I am and what I do. I think that's important. The other is around focus. I think there is something, I'm thinking as a product manager right now, like something that I talk with our teams a lot about is we're in meetings all the time, we're in tools all the time, and so much of our life is interfacing with tools and focus on the collaboration aspect, but not necessarily on what it is to do deep, meaningful work as an individual. What is it to sit and think for long periods of time without being interrupted? And I think that's something that we're going to have to contend with shortly.
So be one persona across platforms, but also having the platforms give you time to think. Faryl.
Yeah, I think two parts. One is people are going to have an expectation of loving their work tools, and the second part is speed of communication. So in terms of loving their tools, we spend a lot of time talking to customers to try to understand how they interact with people, whether it's their personal life or their work life. And one of the trends that might sound silly at first, but actually we've seen make a meaningful difference, is use of emojis when people are communicating. So, when your friends are texting you, you'll just give a thumbs up, or you'll say something, and then you'll add a smiley face after, and it helps indicate the type of tone that's coming with what you're saying. And so we have all these different stickers and emojis that you can put in the doc, and we've seen it just kind of brighten up the way that you work. And also, a big use case for Dropbox Paper is reviews and feedback. And so we've heard from a lot of people that if you just say thanks, you're like, wait, did the boss say thanks like he's mad, or thanks like he's really appreciative and he loves my work, or he hates it? You can spend a lot of mental energy analyzing, whereas if someone writes thanks and they put a wizard thumbs up sticker, which we have, you're going to feel a lot better about your work. And so adding that kind of surprise and delight elements to work tools, I think you'll see a lot of. And the second thing is speed. So I'm thinking about one of our customers, Martin Sign Company. They do physical signs, and they were talking about how they used to send a salesman out to a company and they'd measure the windows, and then they'd write down all the notes, and later that night they'd type up their notes and send it back to the office. And that used to seem really fast, wow, we can get it that night, not when the person flies back. And now that seems really slow. And so they'll actually have someone out at a site measuring the windows, and they're entering the dimensions in Dropbox Paper, and someone back at headquarters is watching them enter it, and they start to build the initial designs as the measurements are coming in. You better just hope there's no typos, because that would create a lot of back and forth. But the point being that I think email used to feel really fast, and now it can sometimes feel slow. And so I think you'll continue to see tools that help speed up and optimize work processes.
So the future of collaboration with emotion and speed.
Yeah.
Philippe.
So my really bold prediction, it's a really bold prediction, is that in 5 years you're obviously all going to use Missive. I guess no one used it today. So no, really, I'm not a big kind of vision type of guy, but it's slowly a slow process of listening to our customer and improving the solution. As for the space, I think what is the most exciting if there can be more integration, not having every single employee being bombarded by notification from all those different apps trying to get everyone's attention and, improving their user engagement. So I have calls with customer, and it's they screencast their inbox, and it's nonstop notification. It's not even emails anymore, it's notification from other platforms. So that's whoa, okay, that's You need to create the rules, at least put them in a folder so you can work your real email faster, right? So yeah, that integration, I think it's what excites me the most, but I think it's going to be hard because we all have interest in building the one platform that ruled them all. So as a small guy, I want integration. As if I get you all to use Missive, I probably won't want this anymore. So I don't know. Yeah, but that's it.
Yeah. I'll kind of tie in your previous question to this one as well. I think, for the most part, I think there's collaboration fatigue, but it's more collaboration tool fatigue. And I think what you're seeing more and more is collaboration is actually just being baked into every product. And so it's not about a collaboration tool. It's just about how do you achieve the goals that you want to achieve faster as a team, faster, a bit more together. So my big vision, I don't know if it's a big vision, but I think pulling on my lived experience a bit, at Mailjet, we have about 90% of our company is based in Europe. So my colleagues here can attest to this, are like 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. is working hard with our colleagues, scrumming on projects closely together, and not wasting time on external tools, but actually just jumping into a document, working on a spreadsheet together. But then after lunch, I'm free to do what Nikita was talking about, which is kind of take a step back and be a bit more creative, be more thoughtful in my work. And I think it's a challenge, but I think what we need to be doing more, I think going forward, is devoting time to those two moments. So really scrum together, I'm using that word probably improperly if there's developers in the room, but work together really quick on a project, get together on it, and then also reserve that time separately to be able to be patient with something, to be able to think things through, especially if you're looking for creative work or more strategic work. So hopefully, I think in the workplace, you can start to see that become a bit more intentional, how you're scheduling your day and how you're scheduling your workforce.
I think this is one topic we have seen even with the last panel, that the more things become collaborative and the faster they get and more emotional, more human they get, the more we need rules to actually be able to work with them. And I want to thank you all for sharing what you shared and for the great stories. And I hope that we will all collaborate even better and faster without stress in the future. Thank you very much.